What is going on, my planting people? My name is Lithius and welcome to Roots Ready. In today's video, we are going to be looking at my top 5 variegated plants for the month of July. I always find myself gravitating a lot more towards variegated plants just because of how unique they are compared to the regular form of the plants that we know and love. Variegated plants tend to be more collectible because they tend to be a lot rarer, and that usually means they're a little bit more expensive and harder to get your hands on. It can also mean that the care requirements for these plants are slightly different to the regular form. So in today's video, not only am I going to show you my top 5 favorite variegated plants, I'm also going to rank them on a scale of 1 to 5 in terms of their ease of care. In my experience, there is a slight difference between the way you care for a regular form of a plant versus the variegated form, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in today's video. The first plant we're going to look at is this one right here. This is my Monstera Thai Constellation, a very popular plant because of how unique it is and how each plant has a very different, almost fingerprint, because of the way the variegation shows up on each individual plant. You will find some plants with extreme variegation, which this one isn't. This is quite a balanced variegated plant because it means that you never really come up against a lot of browning. When you have plants that are sort of block variegated, a massive huge piece of variegation on one part of the leaf, that leaf is obviously not able to photosynthesize, which means that it eventually starts to sort of die and brown and looks really bad. It looks great when the leaf has just come in and it looks nice and healthy, but over time it's the first to go, and to me it sort of ruins the whole look of the plant. So something like this with nice generous splashing is what I tend to gravitate towards. Now, I recently did a video on this plant and I will link it up here in the cards, and I spoke about the journey that I've had with this plant. But as a quick summary of that, I bought this plant as a lovely single leaf cutting. It was very well rooted, but the plant quickly went downhill and I had to almost restart it from a very small chunk. I was successful in doing so, as you can see, and the plant has come a long way. I think I've had this plant for about 2 years, maybe a little bit more. I'll have to double check the timing on that, but I've had it for a long time, and finally I think the plant is looking stable. It's starting to grow out some lovely big beautiful leaves with some nice fenestration in them. Because of that, I'm going to rate this plant a 2 out of 5. It is up there with one of the more challenging plants. You have to be very careful with your watering, because plants like this, I've found, and what I've seen a lot of other people talk about, is that it is susceptible to root rot. And that could be because the plant is less able to photosynthesize, so it isn't able to use up the water in the soil as quickly as a regular green Monstera. That could be the reason. That's sort of my theory on it. That will have to be peer reviewed and checked. But because of that and maybe some other genetic issues with the plant, people do tend to struggle with it, and I've certainly struggled with this plant, and my approach to it is sort of less is more. I tend not to give this plant a really good drench, and some people might disagree with that, but for me, I'm really nervous about having any root rot in this plant, and I'm doing everything in my power to sort of prevent this. So I'll definitely say it's one of the more difficult variegated plant varieties to have, but gosh, we'll look at the reward, the risk to reward. If you get it and you get one and it's happy with you and you are happy with it, it's only going to bring you joy, because this thing is a standout plant. It is a showpiece. It is gorgeous. And can you imagine when this thing is grown and it's big and it's lush? It's going to look amazing. And I think the sort of the battle and the heartache that I went through with this plant will be all worth it in the end. Already I'm saying that it's worth it. So definitely in terms of collectability, it's like a 5 out of 5. Really nice plant to have, and if you have a good specimen, it's amazing. It adds to your collection, but it's definitely one of the ones you have to be a lot more cautious with. So the first variegated plant we're going to look at is this one. This is the Monstera Thai Constellation. A tough plant to care for, but well worth it in the end. The next plant we're going to look at is this one. This is my Philodendron White Princess. It is an absolutely gorgeous plant and very similar to the Thai Constellation, although this leaf does have a sort of a half moon sort of shape to it, and it has this massive block. For the most part, the leaves are actually very nicely speckled with a really good coverage of variegation to green. For the plant's sake, that's a lot better because this means that it's more stable and it's more likely to sort of carry on that variegation. When you tend to have leaves like this that are half moon, depending on which side of the node the next leaf comes out, it can come out completely green or completely white, and that leaf usually dies off in a matter of weeks or months. But this sort of level is what I'm happy with. This is what I'm going for. I'm not sure if this is one of those plants that are likely to revert, but if you look at the likes of the Pink Princess, oh my goodness, that thing was a nightmare. You can have a lovely half moon variegated plant and then it grows a new leaf and it's all burgundy or whatever the color is, reddish kind of color with zero pink. So your best bet when you're picking out a Pink Princess is to go for something that is speckled, because you're more likely to carry those traits out throughout the growth of the plant. And it's similar with this one. I really do like it because of how similar it is to the Thai Constellation. So it is sort of the Thai Constellation of the Philodendron world. A lovely, lovely specimen. In fact, I've got about 3 plants in here, maybe 4 different individual plants, and I'm going for that nice little bushy look. But this, I think, is definitely a climber. So when it starts growing the bigger, larger, more mature leaves, it'll be interesting to see what that looks like then. I find that this plant is a little bit of a slow grower. I have had it for a while, probably approaching 2 years, maybe a bit more or less thereabout, and it hasn't really done a lot of growing. It is starting to get a little bit more bushy than it was before, but I would have expected that after such a long period of time the plant would be a lot bigger, a lot more dramatic in its growth. But it's a little bit slower, but that's fine, because if it grew massive, kind of like my Imperial Red behind me, look at the size of these leaves, they're absolutely massive. I don't think I can accommodate any other big leaf plants. So the fact that it's growing slow is actually working in my favor. How would I rate this plant on a scale of 1 to 5? I would probably give this plant a 4. It's actually relatively easy to care for. I haven't had any issues, any pest issues with this plant, nothing at all. I did notice today though that there are a little bit of spotting here, and I don't know if the camera pick it up, but there's some sort of brown, blackish sort of spots that are developing on the leaf. And I think that is a little bit of kind of user error. That's my fault, because I noticed that when I watered this plant a couple of days ago, I left some water in the pot. So I've watered it through. It's very well draining soil, so it's all sort of gone through, and I didn't give it that much, and it was sort of sitting in some water. And just before this video, I ended up emptying it out. So the fact that it was sitting in that sort of wet root environment, very quickly afterwards the plant is already showing signs of distress. So that is ringing some alarm bells in my head. It's not the first time I've done this. I've actually left water in here accidentally maybe once or 2 other times, so it's still quite positive. However, it's starting to show that it's had a little bit of a hit here. So, you know, I'm going to keep a watch on this. It's still quite high. I would still say it's quite easy to care for. And if you're not like me and you're quite good at remembering to empty out your cash pots, then I think you're probably going to rate this a 5. But for me, I'm going to keep it at a 4, just so it's lost 1 point, but still relatively easy to care for. A very, very lovely plant to add to your collection. And look at that amazing variegation, the Philodendron White Princess. This right here is my Opuntia Monacantha. This is the only variegated cactus in my collection, and boy, does it stand out. This thing is lanky like nobody's business. Look at it. And it is very heavily variegated as well. Look at that pad here. This is not the newest pad. This is the newest pad. I'm so glad that it's got some green in it, because I thought from this angle that it was going to be all variegated and probably would mean that the plant suffers a little bit, but I'm glad to see that we have some green coming in with this plant. This plant was actually a gift from a good planter friend. His Instagram is Serious About Cactus. I did a tour of his garden a while ago, and that was so insightful to see how you can grow cacti and succulents in the UK in a climate like this, outdoors, year round. And he gave me this. I was a small little cutting, and it has exploded in growth. And I'm not sure if this is what this plant is supposed to look like, because this has elongated so much. Usually you find that plants sort of elongate when it has access to no light. So when there's a limited light source, the plant tends to really stretch out in search of the light. But this thing is sitting right on my west facing window. That is the most amount of light that I can provide in my home. And all of my other cacti and succulents are doing amazing. I have a jade plant that has some really lovely, when the sun gets hot, it has some really lovely pink edging around it, and that's a sign that the plant is being exposed to a lot of light. And this plant sits almost next to it in the same window, so I would imagine that this plant is getting more than enough light. So why is it growing this long? I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to ask a cactus expert, probably Serious by Cactus, to get his point of view on this. But for now, the plant is doing okay. Since I've had it, I've had four pads. These two, right, one here, this one and this one. There was a little one that was sort of emerging, and that sort of didn't develop, and it fell off. I literally pulled it off, I think earlier this week, because it was just looking just brown and terrible, so I plucked that one off. And finally, the plant is showing that it wants to start growing. How would I rank this plant on a scale of 1 to 5? Compared to my other cacti and succulents, I would actually maybe give this a 2 out of 5. So quite low down the scale. And the reason for that is this plant is so dramatic when it comes to watering. Honestly, this is the cactus that I water the most out of all of them. I have to treat this almost like a regular houseplant. And whereas my other cacti, although they might go a little bit, without a bit of water, but they retain their rigidity, they stand up strong, and they can, survive a couple of other weeks on the reserves that it stores in its stem. But this thing, as soon as it starts to lose even a little bit of water and it starts to dry out just a little bit, it starts to bend. And you can see that here. You can see how this pad is really wilting over. But honestly, when it's thirsty, the whole top of this plant starts to wilt, and hence why I've had to put it on a stake, because otherwise I think I would lose this plant. It would just sort of snap off and I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. But once I water this plant and I give it a good deep watering, within a day, maybe a day and a half, it perks back up, and then it's sort of ready to go again until maybe another 3 or 4 days, and it starts to do the dance again. So because of that, I would say that this plant's a little bit harder to care for. So if I went on holiday, I'd be quite worried about this plant. I wouldn't be able to go away for a month like I would with my other cactus and not have to worry. With this one, I would have to think about how can I keep this thing well hydrated in that time, because I swear to you, I'll come back and these pads will be on the floor. I'm telling you. So I don't want to risk that. So because of that, I have to sort of keep a very close eye on this plant, making sure that I top up the water, even if it's a little bit at a time, just to make sure that it doesn't completely dry out. But apart from that, it seems to be quite a solid plant. I haven't had any pest issues, although I have noticed today that whilst I'm talking to you, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, there is a little bit of webbing here, and I'm not sure if that is spider mites or just a regular spider making a home in the pads here. So I'm gonna have to look at this thing properly. I can't see anything. I think it might just be a regular spider. I know I saw a jumping spider that likes to live near my cacti collection, and I quite like them. They look quite fun. Quite cute, if I'm allowed to say that, for a spider. So I just leave it alone, because I'm sure it's eating a lot of the other things that I don't want around my plants. I've just left it. So it could be that. I'm hoping it's that, fingers crossed. If not, if it is spider mites, I've got a cure for that and I'll sort it out. But the Opuntia Monacantha, a very interesting and weird, special, let's call it, looking succulent. Lovely to have in your collection, but just be warned that if it's anything like mine, be on top of your watering. As far as cactus and succulents go, I would say this is one of the more difficult ones to keep happy. The Ficus Tineke is I would imagine it to be quite a popular house plant. This is a rubber tree, and it is very similar to this one behind me, but this one is a lovely deep green color, zero variegation on that. This one, unlike its sister plant, has that lovely marbled variegation. Very different, I would say, to the White Princess and the Thai Constellation, where that one was very lightly splashed all over, like you took a paintbrush and splashed it. This one is like marbled. It's like a water painting. A very different approach to variegation, and the one that I really, really like. I feel like each leaf is a dance. If you were to look at the leaves in a certain angle, I'm sure you can sort of create an image in your head. It sort of almost reminds me of camouflage, that the sort of the army and those lot wear. You can see that the way that the variegation works, without me being scientific about this because I'm not sure, but the way that my head tells me that it works is that it's almost a layered, right? So you have the white under, so that they're really variegated, and there's almost a layer of a lighter green and then another darker layer, and where the two sort of mix, you can kind of see the color sort of shifts and moves around. Look at this one where you have a really lovely dark green here, but the rest are sort of layers, like 2 layers under. If you've never had a variegated plant, I would suggest that you start with something like this. Relatively inexpensive, it grows quite large, so it can quickly become a statement piece in your home. And I would say that it's a 5 out of 5. It's certainly an easy plant to care for. I haven't had any issues. Take that back, actually. I have had issues with this plant. So let's downgrade that to a 4 out of 5, right? Because I had this plant, it was probably at its height before about this size. And for whatever reason, I think I pulled it too far away from my west facing windows. It wasn't getting access to tremendous amount of light, and I think that was its downfall, because the plant completely started to sort of rot from the roots. So I remember I took a cutting, I think it was a top cutting, and I was able to restart the plant again, and it's since grown back to the same height that it was a couple of years ago when I first got it. Because of that, I would knock off a point there. But once you get this plant in a position where it gets good light, at the moment it's sitting in front of my east facing window, it's going to be okay. Give it access to light, enough light, and make sure that you keep on top of its watering. It's quite a large plant in a relatively small pot. So I tend to, with the substrate that I've got, which is extremely well draining, I tend to water this plant around once a week. I've put a bit of plastic wrap around this as well, because I find that ficus, like these plants, like to have a little bit of humidity around the roots. That actually encourages a lot of roots to grow even directly from the branches, which is quite nice. You know, it creates a little bit of a different feel with this plant. So I do keep plastic wrap around it just to sort of slow that evaporation. However, I don't let it sit in water. So I water it, a good proper watering, let that water drain out, and then I sort of put the covering back on just to sort of encourage that humidity. Imagine when it grows to something like this, it is definitely a slower grower, but when it gets to this position, what a sight that would be. That would be so incredible, so lovely. The Ficus Tineke. One of the most popular houseplants, and one that a lot of people start on, I'm sure, is the peace lily. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is a variegated form of it, and this is it. This is a lovely specimen of a variegated peace lily. I can't be sure, but I think it's also referred to as the domino peace lily as well. I'm not completely sure, but I'm sure I've heard it referred to that at some point. But what a lovely, lovely plant. 5 out of 5. Straight off the bat, 5 out of 5 in terms of its care. Just like the peace lily is a very easy plant to look after, ensuring that the roots don't go dry for too long. But in any case, the plant will tell you when it needs water because the leaves will droop. This is very similar. I would say this plant is probably not as reactive. It does droop a little bit, but not as dramatically as the green form. And I'm pointing over here because I've actually got a peace lily just here. This is my actual green form of the peace lily. What a gorgeous plant, growing lovely. Finally starting to give me some inflorescences, so I'm happy about that. Very simple to look after, and the variegated one is no different. If I could change anything about this plant, is its speed of growth. I would love for it to be big and juicy and lush as the other one that I've just shown you, but I'm gonna have to exercise patience. Honestly, this thing is growing really, really slowly. It's only in this growing season, in this summer, that I'm able to get some extra little pups grow off the side of this. And in order to do that, I've had to provide this plant with as much humidity as possible. When I say humidity, it's actually sitting in my bathroom window, which is west facing. But what I've done is I've put the whole pot in a food bag, just a plastic bag like this. And that way, when I water the plant, I can ensure that there's just a little bit of water sitting in the bottom there. And the plant can then soak that up, because peace lilies in nature, they tend to grow alongside riverbanks, so they have access to a lot of water all of the time. So that's what I'm trying to do here with this plant, giving it a really good humid environment to grow those roots. But already I only did that the other day, but look literally maybe 2 days ago, and there's no water left in here. This thing is a thirsty, thirsty boy. But it is completely worth it for those leaves. Look at the variegation. This thing is insane. This actually reminds me more of the Thai Constellation than the Thai Constellation itself. Honestly, look at that. It's so wonderfully variegated and marbled. It's absolutely lovely. I also find that the leaves do grow a little bit smaller. And what I like about it is that the leaves have the lovely, ruffly sort of texture. Unlike the regular form of the peace lily, which is got a lot more of a natural leaf look, very leathery. This one is less so. It's sort of got a matte kind of finish to it, and it's got more texture. It's a lot more ruffled and just lovely. Lovely, lovely, lovely. So this is the variegated peace lily. 100% would recommend. And also, if you have a fish tank, these can actually make amazing, amazing aquatic plants as well. When I had a fish tank a long time ago, I remember getting my hands on peace lilies and growing them. All you have to do is make sure you get rid of all of the soil, every last bit of the soil, and then literally you can just pop the plant into the water. I have grown them with the leaves underwater and they've done fine, but sometimes I sort of get it above the water so that the roots stay in the water and the leaves above, and it grows really, really well. Just giving it access to lots of water is what this plant needs. But this is the final of the 5 plants, 5 out of 5 in terms of care and 100% in terms of recommendation. So that's it. Those are the top 5 variegated plants for the month of July. As always, let me know what your favorite variegated plants are, those that you have in your collection or the ones that are at the top of your wish list. Let's talk about it in the comments below. But as always, thank you for watching and keep planting.